I will bring a cup of water. Here's the best that I can offer. In the dusk of coming night, there is evidence of light. With the pattering of rain, let us bow as if in grace. Consider all the ways we heal and how a heart can break. Oh, abide with me where it's breathless and it's empty. Yes, abide with me, and we'll pass the evening gently. Stay awake with me, and we'll listen more intently to something wordless and remaining, sure and ever changing in the quietness of now. Let us ponder the unknown, what is hidden and what's whole, and finally learn to travel at the speed of our own souls. There is a living water, a spirit cutting through, always changing, always making all things new. Oh, abide with me where it's breathless and it's empty. Yes, abide with me, and we'll pass the evening gently. Stay awake with me, and we'll listen more intently to something wordless and remaining, sure and ever changing in the quietness of now.
Where's my background?
There are things I cannot prove, and still somehow I know it's like a message in a bottle that some unseen hand has thrown. You don't have to be afraid, you don't have to walk alone. I don't know, but I suspect that it will feel like home. Oh, abide with me where it's breathless and it's empty. Yes, abide with me, and we'll pass the evening gently. Stay awake with me, and we'll listen more intently to something wordless and remaining, sure and ever changing in the quietness of now.
Welcome, everyone, to the general meeting of Third Act Faith. My name is Martin Wagner. I'm a member of the coordinating committee, and I'm really happy that you're all here with us. We have a really interesting presentation and panel today on the theme of interfaith friendships. So I am sure you will enjoy that. And without further ado, we will get started. We're going to start with a grounding and centering exercise led by Jessica.
Thank you, Martin. Just as this evening's program will reflect on friendship across the spectrum of faith and the human family, we have too a kinship with the natural world. Join me in savoring these images of God's creation in awe and wonder. Will you join me in prayer? Creator God, we offer you praise for bringing us together this evening as friends. For this we give thanks, and let all of God's people say, Amen. And now we have Ace will be introducing the upcoming program.
Thank you so much, and thank you for starting us that way. That was wonderful. I'm Ace Levine. I'm on the committee that planned this evening, and we'll begin with a short film, God Between Us, a rabbi, a swami, a cardinal, 2 archbishops, and a Muslim imam. That's the title. Featuring Rabbi Alon Goshen-Gottstein. Alon Goshen-Gottstein is the founder and director of the Elijah Interfaith Institute in Jerusalem and is acknowledged as one of the world's leading figures in interreligious dialogue. In the film, he describes the essential role of friendship in building interfaith understanding and cooperation. When I watched this film, honestly, I felt a deep appreciation just to be able to witness different religious leaders coming together, eager to develop connections with one another, and it felt like a ray of hope right now in this period. And I will say for myself, not for anyone else, my only caveat was there was a lack of women clergy in the film. And I have some very dear female rabbi friends, and some of you on the screen are also female clergy, but Alon did notice that and is going to, I think he felt bad about that himself. So, but we hope that you too, all of us here tonight, those in Third Act Faith or those here maybe for the first time, to be inspired both by the film and the panel that follows to build on the potential to form strong interfaith alliances in our local communities where you all live, so that we can be more effective and powerful on behalf of our planet and of our democracy. So the film is about 18 minutes and 20 seconds, something like that. And it will be followed immediately by this wonderful panel that we have put together for this evening, facilitated by Deborah Rienstra. And all of you will also have a chance to respond to the film and the panel as time goes on. So sit back. We can't give you popcorn, but we do hope that you enjoy this film.
I want to introduce you. I've written extensively on the question of friendship. My approach to friendship is to ground friendship in God.
I will see you. Have a blessed
True
Shabbat.
friendship is grounded in God. There is increasing polarity, not just between religions and society and politically, and people don't listen to each other, and the world is going to pot.
It's the biggest single-day loss for the Israeli army since January.
Literally, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of Palestinian displaced families. And
There's a war going on in my country right now, ostensibly in the name of religion, at least partly in the name of religion, where Jews and Muslims are killing each other. And yet my friendships have survived. Why? Because they had foundations. They had a depth dimension to them. And therefore what we need to do is to offer that vision to the world as an antidote to a vision of despair that we can supplant by a vision of hope. Well, you'll be happy to know the story my mother likes to tell. When I was, I guess, 2 years old in Rome, my father was the biblical advisor to Ben-Hur, and they took me to St. Peter's, a place I still have great fondness for. And I walked in, and I saw the candles burning, and I cried out loud, Shabbat Shalom! The rest of my life is figuring out how to do this in a slightly higher pitch.
And that's the whole property.
I'll show you. Let's cross the street. We're currently working here in Assisi on the creation of the global house of friendship and hope. And the idea is to explore experience across faiths and to be inspired by the example of friendship. The popes have convened interreligious gatherings here in Assisi, the friendship initiatives that Elijah Interfaith Board of World Religious Leaders has demonstrated.
Personal contact, personal friendship. Then we can exchange deeper level of experience.
We kill each other and we shoot at each other's houses of worship through a sense of otherness. If we can be inspired by the other, it's not only we won't kill the other, but we actually will grow in our appreciation of them, and then what we can take from them to deepen our own spiritual lives. In my teenage years, I found a deep thirst for God, which in turn led me to deepening my own religious practices beyond what was conventional in my society. And as part of that, over the years, also increasing contact with members of other faiths. When exactly it was that I was in the streets of London exploring Hindu temples, it's probably before I got serious about my own religion, but that means that I already had an interest in these things. Already as a 11-year-old, I was taken through India on a tour with my parents and visited other places. So there was all along an awareness of a broader context. But with it then came increasingly contacts, not just with ideas, but with people, with religious communities. Initially Christians, over time Hindu. And I've been walking on these 2 feet, on the one hand, engaging other faiths, but also reflecting what Judaism has to say about other faiths. And I just want to begin, before the actual interview, with a little gesture of friendship. You've already given me great gifts. You've hosted me in your center, and you're coming here as a gift, and I want to give you a little gift.
Okay.
This gift is a book that I wrote. It's a book about the Jewish encounter with Hinduism. Have you been inspired by the prayer lives of people in other traditions that you've encountered?
I have a personal liking for the saints of Christianity, especially those who, like Saint Francis of Assisi, who gave away all their lives for the betterment of others. That's what Sai Baba did. We cannot say we love and we don't care about serving or helping them. I can't just say I love you and I don't do anything for you. That doesn't work.
Why Hinduism? Why not? In many ways, it's more similar to the religions that were at the time of the Bible. It gives us much more time, opportunity to work through certain issues. The challenge really is the challenge of otherness. We start approaching another religion through a sense of otherness. It's inevitable. You don't find yourself comfortable immediately in something that you're strange with, right? It's like learning a foreign language, going to a foreign country. Those boundaries come down with friendship, with exposure, with reading, till there's a gradual assimilation of a way of looking that someone else has. I'm Jewish, I'm Orthodox, I'm deep in my practice, deep in my identification. Thank God my life within Judaism is rich, 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 rich. And yet God is greater than a religion, and therefore the tastes of God are greater than a particular religion, and the reality of God is greater. The prophet Malachi says in chapter 3, then the fearers of God will talk to one another. We have no problem accepting that within a religion. When the horizons expand, you also practice that in relation to other religions, but there's always a sense where God is more in the depth, more in the height, more in the breadth. So part of that breadth, which can also be depth, is also experiencing God as others experience Him. I don't become Christian thereby, I don't become Hindu thereby, I don't necessarily believe in the tenets of the faith, but I do discover what God is to those people, and in some way that also radiates to my own experience of God. Oh, hello, you're back. That was early. What happened? You were going to have a working lunch.
We decided to come to lunch at home.
Yeah?
Hey, okay. Do you need something? Hey, today's also.
I couldn't go so long with you.
Okay.
Are you okay?
Hey, have you heard what I said to Alan to reproach him? You didn't say?
What was the reproach? You told me to be Christian, no?
Didn't feel reproached by him, no.
By you?
No.
You're pure love, my man. How can you reproach anyone? I think you're a failed bishop because you have too much love.
Okay. Okay, so have you already begun? Or?
Yeah, we're in the middle. Come sit with me, we can talk some more. What happens when you see Muslims or Hindus come here?
I see in the other religions a real experience of God, knowing that God doesn't live far away from us, He lives in us. And so, in every people who puts himself with a sincere heart in front of God, I feel a real communion.
Of the different faiths that you've encountered, through Elijah or otherwise, which of those particular faiths have really left an imprint on you or were transformative for your own personal growth?
I would have to say, number one, Islam.
Islam, really?
Yes.
Oh my God, tell me more about that. I'm learning so many things during this conversation.
Well, the idea, first of all, of visiting shrines for them, and the prayer and the even solitude at times. You know, sometimes you have an incomplete understanding of faith, even though I taught religious studies. But to experience, to encounter is a lot more than that. And I think that was one of the real learning experiences for me.
Can you reflect on the importance of difference, tension, disagreement? Is it important to acknowledge that there are real differences between religions and to not be afraid of them?
My approach has been that we need to learn to understand the difference and to see how it empowers the other and not to put the difference aside.
I agree with you, and in fact our differences, call it diversity rather, it enriches us. You know, it helps us to do what we can do in the best possible way. And I think for a Hindu worshiping an idol is the best possible way to express his devotions. For somebody else it could be another way. I do not have to disrespect them for what they're doing because they are able to achieve the same goal at the end.
So you don't feel like you have a greater portion of the truth than I as a Jew do?
I believe I have the truth.
What do I have then?
If you want to put it in a very technical way, you have an incomplete truth.
Ah, nice.
Because it was perfected in Jesus Christ for me.
Okay. So when you look at me, you do look at me as someone who has a lesser part of the truth.
I don't know if I would say a lesser part. It's incomplete for me.
Incomplete.
Because Christ for us is the fullness. He completes everything. But I don't put that as a judgment statement between
No, we know
you and me.
we know it for 20 years. I never heard that you really think that of me. One of the things that we saw in the interviews that we've held so far is that friendship can be constructed even in a spiritual sense, despite theological difference. 2 interviews with Christian interlocutors put me up against the question of the potential inferiority of my own religious path compared to theirs. And yet, one could see that the power of 20 years of friendship in the case of Nikita, 5 or whatever years of friendship with the case of Bishop Sorrentino, Domenico, and now this new formed friendship with Swami, they all bring us to that point of what Malachi speaks of, the fears of God talking to one another. And that encounter touches something in the heart that almost makes it secondary what the theological difference is.
I will see you. Have a blessed Shabbat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, see you soon.
We're going to take salad and then you say a little prayer. We'll let you say the prayer because we don't have the grace of having an imam in our home in Italy every day. Even in Israel, we don't have the grace of having an imam every day.
May I serve you?
Yeah, but take enough.
No, I'm fine.
You have a degree of proficiency in the spiritual geography of this place. How do you see St. Francis as a figure in a context of the conversations we're having here? And how do you see Assisi as a locality for realizing this kind of vision that we obviously share?
Assisi in the life of a saint such as St. Francis has a very important and symbolic impact because coming from a very aristocratic family, he left this wealthy background to be concentrated on the search for God. Already this example is a very universal teaching. Secondly, not in Assisi, but when he left here, one of his travels was in Egypt during the Crusades. And eventually he went up to the meeting with the Sultan Malik al-Kamil, and he discovered that the so-called ignorant enemy against the religion was a very wise politician, a very deeply religious intellectual, and I think this last episode is quite a symbolic one.
So, Yahya, here we are in our home in Assisi. After many years of knowing each other, we're enjoying perfect tranquility and the beauty of a spiritual sharing. And yet, our brothers in faith are killing each other. And as a consequence of that, there's rising anti-Semitism and rising Islamophobia. What is the meaning of this moment against this background of increased tensions between our communities?
But if I may say in a provocative way, there is no meaning, there is no reason. There is a lack of reason, a lack of wisdom. On one side, you have some terrorists, and on the other side, you have an army of a government that decided to punish the terrorist act by an invasion and by a murder of thousands of civilians. Where is Judaism and Islam in all this?
Maybe we need a different paradigm. Judaism's fundamental stance is a balance between its own particularity and a broader universality of vision. Regrettably, but understandably due to historical circumstances, some of the people who've been the most spiritual have been also the most insular and keeping up walls in relation to what surrounds them. If Christians are killing you and persecuting you, it's very hard to look at the example of the Christian saints and to say, well, there's a sign of God. On the contrary, so Christian anti-Semitism and violence are a sign of non-God. But then, the repentance of the Christian church, as we have seen, especially in the 20th century in the Catholic Church and other mainline churches, is itself a sign of God's working, so that religions can and must purify themselves. And that holds true for those faiths that have persecuted Judaism. It's also true for Judaism itself. And what I want to say to you is thank you, because you have agreed to come here for this interview in what I understand is something very exceptional.
Yes, it is.
Why did I have the honor, or why do we have the honor of your having agreed? You told me, you wrote to me, I've canceled all other commitments, but I will come to this. Why is that?
I imagine because of the importance of the cause, not just our friendship, which has a part in it, but for the importance of the cause. I do no video, no recording, except the preaching of the paper household. I think this is something God wants and society needs. Friendship, reconciliation among human beings is something which is no doubt in the will of the Lord, of God.
We said that religious geniuses can be inspiring to other religions. In what way can St. Francis be inspiring to people of other religions?
One thing that strikes in Francis of Assisi is the fact that he spoken against nobody. Speak in favor of truth, not against others. He didn't speak against Saracens or Jews or heretics. He only spoke in favor of people. I think this is something very, very important.
So my theology of friendship, and let me cite here a Christian voice, Aelred of Rivaux, and he coined this expression, you and me and Jesus between us. Once there's a determination that we're not going to argue who's right, we're not going to try and force our religion of the other or even attempt to change the identity of the other, but approach it from the perspective of mutual enrichment in God's presence, then those points of contention become points that are revelatory in your homilies, in what you have to say. And I bless you that the Holy Week and that the Easter will be rich. Judaism on the whole, as I argue in my book, is in crisis. And the core of that crisis is a God crisis. And part of addressing that God crisis is precisely in the engagement across religions. Because when you have a meaningful engagement across religions, you realize that other religions are grounded in God. And that, whether you want to or not, will force you or the conversation or the religion to bring God back to the center because you see how other people practice their religion.
And it is our common hope at the Elijah Institute and all the leaders who have signed on to this appeal that we can inspire the man and woman on the street to recognize, to cultivate, and to practice a new way of being in the world, a way that's characterized through this theme of friendship across religions.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Deborah Reenstra. I'm also a member of the Third Act Faith Planning and Coordinating Committee. And while you are taking a deep breath and thinking a little bit about what we've just seen, it's my honor to introduce our wonderful panelists for you tonight. We have a sort of convergence of wisdoms here tonight, and I'm going to moderate a little discussion among them. And so I'll introduce them. I'm going to read their little introductions, and then I'll begin with our opening questions. So Kosen Gregory Snyder is the Senior Director and Assistant Professor of Buddhist Studies at Union Theological Seminary, where he oversees the Master of Divinity degree program in Buddhism and interreligious engagement, as well as the Thich Nhat Hanh program for engaged Buddhism. Professor Snyder is an ordained Zen Buddhist priest and Dharma transmitted teacher in the lineage of Shunryu Suzuki. Reverend Cameron Trimble is a spiritual leader, author, and visionary strategist. As founder and CEO of Convergence, she helps faith communities across North America and the UK become more inclusive, resilient, and spiritually grounded. An ordained Christian minister and leadership coach, her work weaves innovation, justice, and sacred wisdom, offering clarity and courage for these uncertain times. Then our third panelist, Imam Jamal Rahman, is co-founder and Muslim Sufi minister at Interfaith Community Sanctuary and adjunct faculty at Seattle University. He is former co-host of Interfaith Talk Radio and travels nationally and internationally, presenting at retreats and workshops. He is the author of many books, including most recently Fragrance of the Quran, Reflections on Verses of Beauty and Wisdom. So thank you to all of you for being with us tonight. We so appreciate your presence. And so I'm going to start out by asking each of you just to share a little bit first about your own interfaith experience and what interfaith friendships have meant to you. And then we'll maybe go more specifically at the film and your thoughts about the film. So Jamal, I'll start with you. Will you tell us a little bit about interfaith friendships in your life?
Certainly, Deborah. And first of all, such a joy to be among these rectangles of love. You know, I love this quotation by Rumi, who says, "Come out of the circle of time and enter the circle of love." So, you know, here I am in the Interfaith Community Sanctuary. This is a church building which we own. And here we foster a living, breathing interfaith community. We have Muslims, we have people from other from the monotheistic faith, Eastern traditions, people from Native American tradition. We have atheists, agnostics. And we say that interfaith is not about conversion. Interfaith is about completion, becoming a more complete, developed human being. I also want to say I am 1/3 of the interfaith amigos. You know, since 9/11, 2001, I've been working with a rabbi and a pastor. We travel the country, even overseas, to share a message of inclusivity. We say all religions are a path to a shared universal. and we are good friends. And we have realized over these 25 years that the best way to overcome polarization is really creating the environment where we can become friends. Simple, but not easy. It requires humility. It requires persistence. It requires sincerity. It requires higher awareness. But we know that once there is some element of human friendship, it becomes impossible to demean or demonize the other. Last thing I wanted to say, my parents were diplomats. So I've traveled and met many people from different traditions, been to many houses of worship, and I've realized the best friendship is going beyond our tribal affiliations and just connecting on the basis of, primarily, I would say, kinship of spirit.
Mm.
And that's the end of my sermon.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I think what we are most interested in exploring tonight and for the next couple meetings of Third Act Faith is possibility. What are the possibilities for interfaith friendships? So, Cameron, would you share a little bit about your experience with interfaith friendships?
Yes, and I would welcome Jamal to preach anytime. That was lovely. So my pathway into deep friendships that have transformed me in interfaith space came in part through my work through the United Church of Christ, my standing there as a Christian pastor, the pastor of 4 congregations in that tradition. But through a wild and random story, ended up doing conflict mediation work through programs with the connected to the United Nations. And when you do that kind of work, you have to really deeply understand the culture, the nuance, the stories, the myths, the religious traditions of the people that you're working with. And so it was in those kinds of encounters that I really began to kind of fall in love with all of these different traditions that I was encountering, and the ways in which the stories of these traditions animated people to such courageous acts and such beautiful ways of presencing in the world. So, as I was thinking about the ways this has formed me, I mean, I've had incredible Sufi teachers who've, taught me about meditation and chanting and prayer of deep longing. I've had Buddhist teachers who've taught me what it means to take refuge in the teaching and to sit with suffering. It turns out the harder thing for me to do is sit with joy, weirdly enough, and but to sit with it and not run, from it. I've had incredible rabbi colleagues who have taught me to wrestle with the text, and in so doing wrestle with God, and to go to the edge of the wilderness with Moses in the Exodus story. I've also had a rabbi introduce me to babka bread, which is surely what God tastes like. I mean, and I've learned the chocolate babka is the gateway to cinnamon babka, which will transform you. I mean, it is an existential experience. We should just all get around and have babka bread, and world peace will not be nearly as challenging, is what it seems to be before us. So, and my Muslim colleagues have taught me so much about just radical hospitality and sacrificial love in ways that I really find extraordinarily challenging to language, because it's just it's beyond the words, So these experiences have a way of doing their work within us, and I don't know who said it. I'm sure I didn't make it up. The phrase that transformation moves at the speed of trust. And what I've learned is that these friendships, just like we saw in the movie, which I know we'll talk about in just a minute, but they move at the speed of shared meals and deep conversation and walks in nature, and at a pace at which we don't see often in the world, but that's really where they take root and they form us in the storytelling that we offer to one another. So I could nerd out, but I'll stop.
Oh, we'll have more opportunity to nerd out. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Great. Gregory, would you share with us what interfaith friendships have meant in your life?
Well, thank you for having me here, and it's good to hear from both of you so far. Thank you. And well, I'm in New York City, one of the homes of Babka, so I agree with you. And
Green's Bakery in New York is the place to go, I've learned.
So I had a Buddhism program in a Christian seminary, and that also has a program in Islam, and I'm colleagues from different traditions. So my daily work life, we live where we work. So my daily work life is one of living among friends and colleagues who are from a number of traditions. So the I could go so many directions, but I will first start with something that is just personal. In the last few years, I went through a health crisis that resulted in a difficult time in my own spiritual life for a while. And within Zen Buddhism, we have this notion of the great doubt, or when you reach a point in your spiritual path where things begin to crumble for a moment. And what I realized, it wasn't sufficient. And so I looked at Al-Ghazali and what happened for him when he went into his great doubt. I look at Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross, and there were other, and then spoke to people in those traditions who were informed by those stories in those ways. And I agree with what has been said about completion or maturation by being in dialogue with friends who are in different traditions during this time, because it isn't just that friendships across traditions offer me perspectives from their tradition. It's that the perspectives from those traditions fold inside of my own and transform my own relationship to my own tradition. And that, I think, and it's not necessarily that we end up agreeing on tenets or anything like that, but there's something that is deeper than the details, and that is the intention of practitioners to move through through the challenges of a religious life and the joys of religious life, and we all face aspects of our lives that disrupt that path in ways that we don't expect. And when we're in our own tradition, we kind of have a shorthand for the way we talk. And we miss some of our own assumptions because we're used to them with each other. But when we unfold ourselves into the traditions of others, those assumptions become challenged and they're deepened. And so I find it a necessary part of my tradition to be involved with friends in other traditions. I can't imagine not being in those conversations. I would lose something. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I really love that image of folding in. That's so helpful. And isn't it interesting that all the great spiritual traditions have some way of talking about the dark night of the soul, as we say in Christianity? Yeah, thank you for all of that. So here's our moment to respond to the film in whatever way you want to do so. So Gregory, we'll just go backwards and start with you this time. Would you respond? What thoughts does the film raise for you?
Well, it's interesting for me as from a Buddhist tradition starting off, I don't have an issue with this at all, but it's always striking to me when it starts off with the organizing principles God.
Yeah, I thought about that. Yeah, as we were listening. Yeah.
So
how do you respond to that?
The reason I don't have a really issue with it, I know some Buddhists do, and some practitioners who come from Dharmic traditions because in our tradition, it's not that there's not gods in the history of Buddhism, it's that any being is subject to the Dharma, is subject to the law of co-creation that always exists. So there is nothing above that. And And the reason it never is because when you start talking to theologians about what they mean by God, it goes everywhere from a person in the sky all the way to something that sounds pretty much like the Dharma to me. So there's a huge range of what that means. So there are in some understandings of what God is, I would say, no, that has nothing to do with my faith. But in other understandings of what God is, it completely aligns with what I understand it to be. So what do we mean when we say that word? And we could have a year of conferences on that. So I think I take it when I hear it as there is a depth of, how do I say this? There's a depth of what it is to be a human being brought into this world that is beyond anything we will ever understand. And we feel the creative source coming through us all of the time. And we can share that with each other. And that is a sacred thing that is beyond any of us and beyond any of our understanding. Call it what you will, but I think being devoted to it is part of what it is to be a human being. So
yeah, being on the path. I was going to ask what language would you use, but you just offered some. So thank you. Yeah. Jamal, let's go to you next. What are your thoughts about the film? Responses?
The main focus was friendship, and we've experienced this in our own relationship with the Interfaith Amigos. We've had a relationship of over 25 years, but what is critical, we feel, is that this friendship cannot be based on just getting together periodically during Seder or birth of the Buddha or Islamic Eid. It has to be sustained. There's a very common complaint that, especially among the monotheistic traditions, that when Jews, Muslims, and Christians, the greatest problems are among them actually, when they get together at these amazing, wonderful programs, the conversation and the behavior is, quote unquote, absurdly nice. When they go home, Jews become occupiers, Muslims become terrorists, Christians become liars, unless there is a sustained, you might say, an attempt to become authentic friends over time. It requires patience, humility, continuity. So that is my first observation. The second one is I feel that this film was so beautiful, but I wish there was another sequel. Meaning, when people get together, like I and my Interfaith Amigos, after we become friends, the more deeper stages, we become vulnerable, willing to be vulnerable. We begin to talk about where religion goes astray. Not in your religion, in my religion. Every religion has, our holy books have verses. Some are very difficult. We call them particular and universal. Particular verses are in desperate need of historical textual context. Rumi, that 13th century sage, when he commented on these particular verses, he would say that, well, not just Rumi, other sages also, that we wish, these are modern sages, we wish we could use whiteout for some of those verses. Or, as the sages say, I wish we could engage in holy amnesia. So if we have these conversations of willing to be vulnerable, the Interfaith Amigos wrote a book about that, we'll realize that no matter what the scriptures are, there's some big problems in my tradition. And let's focus on that. There is exclusivity. There's violence in the scriptures. There's unequal status of women. There is homophobia. And it's not just to criticize. What can we do about that? How do we heal that? One last point, at least we found from our friendship, that no matter what the religion is, no matter what spectrum you come from, it is critical we do spiritual practices. For example, silence. There's no such thing as a Buddhist silence, Christian silence, Hindu silence. It's just silence. We have to practice silence. The Sufis say that doesn't matter what your religion is, you've got to transform your ego from a commanding master into a personal assistant. You've got to cleanse the heart. You've got to open the heart. This is all in the Quran, for example, as in every other holy book. I'm not saying Muslims practice that. If we don't do that, then we realize that we will not be able to overcome either the social injustices or the planetary degradation. If you want to overcome social injustices, I have to overcome my prejudices, my biases, my stereotyping of the other. This requires spiritual practices. I'll end with a quote that I know all of you know by Gus Speth, because in our community we repeat it again and again and again. Gus Speth, who was the scientific advisor to President Carter, he said, the biggest environmental problems are what? Loss of biodiversity, climate change, ecosystem collapse. He said, with 30 years of science, we could overcome them. But now I've realized the biggest environmental problems are not climate change, loss of biodiversity, ecosystem collapse. The biggest environmental problems are selfishness, greed, apathy, indifference. This requires spiritual practices. So that for me is a very big key of this friendship. Let's learn from one another and experience spiritual practices and actually do it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you and the Interfaith Amigos need to make the sequel. I think we all agree. Yeah, you're on deck. Cameron, what thoughts does the film raise for you?
My favorite moments, this was the second time I got to see it, so this was lovely to, I already knew the plot line, right? My favorite moment was when Rabbi Gottstein says to the failed Catholic bishop, because he was too nice. He said, "Come sit with me and we'll talk." Right? He just stopped everything, the recording, the stream of thought, the everything that he was in, and he said, "Just come sit with me, and and we'll talk." And I mean, that is the spirit, isn't it, of genuine welcome and the relationality and the kind of the relational field that we can cultivate that invites people in and pulls each other towards one another. And that kind of generosity is, I think, a beautiful starting place for the invitation into these kinds of relationships. So I loved that was modeled for us. I was thinking about, because they're in Assisi, I was thinking about Pope Francis, and I believe it was his third encyclical, which was Fratelli Tutti, where he said that God doesn't see with God's eyes, God sees with God's heart. And what we got to see in that first edition with sequels to follow is were people seeing one another with their hearts. And that is something that makes the rest of us as observers come alive. There's something that wakes up in us, that remembers, and hyphenate that word, remembering. It reattaches us to the ancient stories that make us most human, and that remind us that there are relational ways to be that have always been true for us, that modernity seems to have invited us to forget. So I think one of the other things, and he actually spoke about this in the film, but again, the second viewing, it really struck me, is that the solution of separation is wreaking terrible havoc on our global imaginations, but we're seeing it at every scale of our society, at local, national, and international relationships. And what I think these interfaith relationships invite us into is, and what our Indigenous brothers and sisters would would remind us, as they have always known, is that we are grounded in an interdependence that each faith tradition brings a lens to, that helps us see, differently through each tradition, but pointing to that one truth that we're, as I say in the end of my daily meditations every day, we're all in this together, And so this idea that that we are that our separateness is actually illusion, which is not to say that our differences are, and our diversity is indeed a gift, but the separation that we've put in place, this narrative that we are against one another, it's me versus you, not me with you, I think is a spiritual crisis, couched or finding its expression in political crisis and ecological crisis. And I think there's a deeper work here at this evolutionary moment in human history. So what I found in that modeling that Rabbi Gottstein offers to us is a way in which we can be in a relationship where we don't have to agree on everything to walk together. The most important thing is that we just keep showing up. We keep choosing love. And that kind of leadership, that model of leadership, is something I find deeply inspiring right now.
Thank you. So you teed us up really beautifully for the next question, which has to do with our mission as Third Act and Third Act Faith, which has to do with the climate and democracy. So what we're trying to explore is, what is the potential for interfaith friendships and those kinds of relationships that you were describing, that see with the heart, that are based on love, that overcome separation? What is the potential for that, especially for older people of faith? Third Act is for older people. Is there some kind of alchemy there that can help us be more effective in our work on democracy and climate mitigation, adaptation, and regeneration? So Cameron, we're going to start with you now this time. We're taking turns.
So much from me at the moment.
Sorry
So I'm going to start with a story. A few months ago, I was in a conversation with a woman who works with children and youth. And she was saying they're going into a recruitment period, trying to get adult volunteers to work with particularly their teenagers. And I ask, well, what are the qualifications? What are you looking for in adults to work with their teenagers? And she like leaned back in her chair, and you could just see this kind of fatigue settle over her. And she said, honestly, if I could just find adults with regulated nervous systems, that would be a real win for working with our kids. But I think that's right. I think there's something about the wisdom of aging. I'm 46, so I don't know that I get to be in the cool club yet. I don't know what your cutoff is here, but
we don't check. You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. But there's a way of eldering that's desperately needed right now, that at the very base starts with just being a steady, stable presence in the midst of what feels like deeply chaotic, disorienting, and terrifying times for a lot of people, and to provide stories that remind us that we as a people, as a humanity, have been here before. In fact, many of you in your lifetimes have probably lived through some of these cycles. You've lived through when democracy was attacked and it came back. You've lived through times where political leaders were caught in deep scandal, and you've had to find your way through that. You've lived through watching the evolution of how the earth is changing, and you recognize the fragility of these systems now, and can speak to that with a kind of wisdom that is that can bypass the freneticness of social media, etc. There's a a deeper knowing that elders at this point can offer. So it is, in fact, an alchemic power, because what you can model for all of us, or maybe I'll say we, so I'm not speaking at you, I'm speaking with you, is the recognition that our differences are not threat, that we actually have participated in deep collaboration at tremendous scales. And we have empowering and inspiring examples of when that's been true for us as a humanity. And that the courage, or maybe I'll say it this way, that in truth, every moment that has led all of us, regardless of our age, to this moment of democratic questioning and ecological collapse, every moment has prepared us to lead, that we were made for such a time as this, that we have the gifts, that we have the skills, we have the wisdom and the stories, if we're willing to share those among one another and to turn to one another for inspiration, courage, and strength in this time.
Mm.
We were made for such a time as this. We just have forgotten.
Mm. Thank you. Gregory, what would you say about that potential alchemy that can make us more effective in our work on democracy and climate?
Well, I appreciate what's been said about practices. I do. We're in a much of the polarization that we're involved in is because we are reducing the fullness of our personhood to little sentences on digital screens that are getting thrown at each other. And at least in our country. And I think there is something, I agree with Jamal, that there is a silence practices. So here's just an interesting anecdote. So we're at Union Theological Seminary, and the chapel is obviously a Protestant chapel. And so when the Buddhists and the Muslim students would want to do their practices, one thing that we would say is, well, the issue for us is there's not really a sacred space because there's nowhere for us to take our shoes off. Very simple thing, right? We actually need to, we both come from traditions where we cross a boundary and our shoes go away. And so we built a space, and there's a place, and the Muslims and the Buddhists practice together in the space, and nobody can designate it. The times have to stay open because everybody's ritual. So we end up practicing together. There'll be Buddhist sitting meditation, and the Muslims will come in for prayer, right? And they'll go. And so it's happening together in that space. Now, that is incredibly moving to be a part of as a regular pulse of one's day. Right? That there is a shared temple that then the sick students come in and so on, right? Anybody from traditions without shoes. And so there is something in something as simple as not wearing shoes that united us all together in a particular way of being together and learning from each other in ritual, in silence, in prostrations, in things that we share together. So the alchemy, I feel we need to stop reducing the fullness of our embodied life to tiny one-phrase beliefs that we throw at each other and accuse each other with. And find our ways to the wholeness of each other's being in these practices together. So yeah, I'm in the camp of let's practice together. And really, when it comes to democracy and when it comes to politics, the secret weapon of spiritually trained people are our embodied practices. They can say what they will, but I promise you, if 500 of us went down to Battery Park and went on a 10-day fast, there's nothing they can do. There's nothing that can be done to fight that. It's a level of spiritual discipline that goes beyond what the materialist, fussy, fighting culture is doing and says something very, very different than our spoken voices. And I think it's time for that again. it's time for that level of commitment of religious life again.
Mm. The idea of embodied practice and even shared sacred space,
Yeah.
for what it teaches the body and through the body, the spirit, seems to be there's really interesting potential there. Yeah, thank you. Jamal, what about you?
Yes. Some years ago, I met this Christian pastor on one of our tours with the Interfaith Amigos, who said he spent 30 years in Africa countering the Muslims, speaking ill of Islam because the Muslims were converting the natives to Islam. And he said he spent his entire 30 years just fighting that negatively. He said, now in my old age, I've realized, and I guess it's a common phrase in Christianity, that I wish I was more Christ-like and less Caesar-like. And old age has taught me something through my experiences. He says, now in my retirement, I'm less attached, very much less attached to my, what you would call theological rigidity, much more flexible. By the way, I love this wonderful Sufi saying about flexibility, blessed are the flexible, for they will never be bent out of shape. So he has achieved more flexibility, he said, in his older age, a greater, what Sufis would call inner spaciousness, to become more inclusive. And I love the words of Rumi. He says, in old age and in your wisdom, you become less attached to what he calls scholarly vertigo, less attached to exhausted famousness, and you begin to move. This is a very famous Sufi saying, from knowledge of the tongue to knowledge of the heart, and it's a different kind of awareness, realization. So I would say another alchemy is, to me, the alchemy is time. As you advance in time, hopefully become wiser, learn from your experiences, and you realize time is precious and it's later than you think. And you want to spend that time to be good and to do good, for the sake of your children, your grandchildren, for the sake of humanity. There's one saying of the Prophet Muhammad I always end my sermons with. The Prophet Muhammad said, when you arrived here from the invisible world, everybody around you was laughing and smiling, but you were crying and weeping. Live such a life. Live such a life in your words, in your deeds. Live such a life that when you're departing, everybody around you is crying and weeping, but you are laughing and smiling. I wish this for myself and for everybody else. Thank you.
I think I'm experiencing, and maybe you are too, everyone else on this call, the alchemy of learning from each other and enriching each other and enfolding into each other. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask each of you to ask another one of you a question. And while you're thinking about what you want to ask and who, those of you who are also here, I hope you are thinking about your questions and putting them in the chat. And Ace, I think you're keeping track of them. Yep. Okay. So in a minute, we'll ask Ace what her favorites are that she wants to present to the panel. But meanwhile, which of you has a question for
I have a question
another?
from my brother and sister Cameron, brother Gregory. Would you agree that the work of intrafaith, me working with Muslims, conservative, non-conservative Muslims, is far more difficult than interfaith? That's been my experience.
That literally, so I think somebody asked that question in the chat. So I think that you have nailed the tension that we're all feeling. Yes, yes. On the surface, I would say that that's true. What I think my work in mediation has taught me is ultimately what I'm sensitive to and what I'm chasing in people is, where is their grief and where is the pain? because usually our defended positions and our progressivism or our conservatism within my tribe, I'll speak to Christianity, is it gets activated where it shows up in ways that are unhelpful because there's pain or there's unprocessed grief or there's something there that needs to get surfaced. So what I'm finding is that if we just had better tools, we might not cannibalize each other as rapidly as we seem to be doing at the moment. There's actually a beautiful Tomlin practice about this called Just Like Me. I don't know, Gregory, if you, I don't want to speak to a tradition you're closer to than I am, but this idea that that if we can look at the other and recognize that underneath all of this, there is something that is just like me, that there's some point of connection that brings us together in that. So anyway, that is to say, yes, I feel that pain nearly daily.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think the closer we get to each other, I don't mean this as ungracious as it sounds, but the more petty we can become, and focus in on a kind of level of detail and difficulty. I don't know if you remember this, Jamal, when we were in Japan, there was a woman there. She was also Sufi. Do you remember her name? I can't remember, but I just remember her saying that we were a group of, for lack of a better word, mystics from various traditions. And I remember her saying, I feel more at home with the people in this room, all the people in this room from the different traditions, than I do with people from my own religion. And I felt that way. I felt so close to everyone in the room because these were all practitioners that were in the kind of mystic part of their particular tradition. And I thought there were connections that were being made there that I wouldn't have made if I were in a group of all Zen Buddhists. That wouldn't have happened. So yeah, I do agree that that's true.
Thank you.
I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that it's people who have mature souls who are getting together to do interfaith work. And, we can't always depend on everybody in our faith traditions being that far along on a path. So that's where you get into trouble, I guess. We probably have time for one more of you to ask the others a question, and then we should probably go to some of the questions from the larger group. So anybody else want to chime in with a question for each other?
For being polite. Gregory, I feel like you're giving me a lot of space. I thank you for that. I would like to know, since I think we all hold a deep commitment and respect to spiritual practice, do you have a favorite that is particularly useful to you right now? Particularly in helping us not lose our minds and, become deeply reactive.
You mean a spiritual practice?
Yeah, I mean, it could be, like turn off Fox News, but I was thinking more of the spiritual practice. Was that too blunt? That might have been really in your face. Sorry.
My favorite spiritual practice is focusing on the heart and telling the heart, I love you. Simple as that. Just, I love you or you are loved. I use this in my therapy. And, I deal with some difficult ones too, like heroin addiction, incest. And I'm saying it in very simple terms, but if I can convince or create the environment where my friend is focusing on the heart and telling the heart with feeling, I love you, or you are loved. For me, I have found that has had the most phenomenal success in my work, in my ministry.
Yeah.
What I would say resonates with that is staying with my heart as the center of experience, which we've talked about, is that when I catch my center of experience going up here, no, bring it back down, because I make different decisions. I meet people in different ways. I actually have a different reality. And so important to me as well, very similarly.
That's beautiful. Yes.
Thank you. All right, Ace, what have we got? What have we got in the queue?
You caught me by surprise, but I unmuted myself. I was busy thinking about what these folks were saying and trying to imagine my practice, and then you brought me back. But anyways, thank you so much. What a wonderful conversation to witness. I really, it's good for the heart, Jamal, really. So here's a question that Terry has asked. Hate seems to spread like wildfire. Real friendship takes time and cultivation. This seems like an intractable problem. What are your thoughts? And along with that, later in the chain, Catherine asked something somewhat similar, not about hate, but about the fact that the crisis of climate change is so rapid and is really accelerating. Do we even have time to build up interfaith friendships to save our planet? So that sense of urgency, along with that sense of, how much time do we have to do what we need to do? So thoughts about that?
Very quickly, if I may just say, the Quran has a verse that says, when there is utter helplessness, chronic hopelessness, it's not that the eyes become blind, the hearts become blind. When the hearts become blind, you can use force, you can use reason. There's always a counterforce to that. Like the Buddha said, hate never yet dispelled hate. Only love dispels hate. That forces us to become creative, genuine, sincere, patient, but only love, only compassion will be able to open a blinded heart. How we do that, that's a whole different story. What was the second part, what you said about climate change?
The urgency of building these relationships in order to really work together takes time. And do we have enough time for this? How can we, overcome that?
The truth is that no one religion, no one culture can take care of these problems, which are so phenomenal. The problem of climate change is so phenomenal that we simply have to. It is mandatory that we get together with people of different cultures, races, religions. Otherwise, it will never be solved. One group of people can never solve that, in my opinion.
Any thoughts by Gregory or Cameron on that particular issue?
I think there's something because the question was about hate in particular. I think in some way, and we do have to make a very conscious decision to, because of exactly what Jamal said about the Buddha, that we're renouncing hate, which doesn't mean to repress it, because hate will come up. We're humans, and these energies come up in us. But when it does come up, I think we have to have made a decision. I am not here to hate.
Mm.
And when hate comes up in me, I actually will love the hate. I'll saturate it with love, because in that moment I'm vulnerable to it, and it has to be loved. Everything about us has to be loved when we're vulnerable to hate. So I think there is something about making that conscious decision. And as far as the environment, we have to decide we want to be here, because the earth is going to be fine. So we have to be clear what decision we're making. It's not, we often talk about the environmental crisis and the earth, and it's really about humans. I mean, other species are going too, but do we want to be here as human beings? Or is the great forest going to return without us? Because it's coming back. It will either be here or not.
I do think your comment, Gregory, I agree with it. I think the question is, you're talking about profound shift in consciousness. How do we get enough people to get to that place that
we may not.
No?
We may not. And I think that is just we may not. And that's not to throw away it's just to be really honest with ourselves. We may not. And so how do we as people do this and become examples? And and for people to have other options to look at and see, and other ways. And I think our spiritual practices and these conversations we're having are really important. But I think it's hard to admit, but I look at us right now and I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But I hope that our better angels take over and we collectively do what Jamal's saying. We all talk to each other and we're all in concert and we understand we need each other and we work together. I hope that happens.
I feel
We'll work for it diligently.
Right. There's a ancient text from Qumran in, the Dead Sea Scrolls, where the images of the sons of darkness versus the children of light, and the great battle, and this feels like part of that, right? So there's such faith in, well, the sons of light or the children of light are still very much with us. We can have this kind of gathering with people wanting to come and learn together. So Cameron, do you have a response to any of that? And then I'll go on to another question.
Yeah, so I want to add just another a layer. There's hate, which is a live, animated emotion. But Thomas Aquinas actually taught, of all of the sins, the most dangerous sin was what we call slothiness, or acedia. And today, that can often find its expression in despair, which despair is different than hate. And Thomas Aquinas would say that despair is actually the most dangerous, because you stop caring both about yourself and about anyone else. And that's the conundrum that we're in, the kind of the danger, I think, that we're in, is that we lose ourselves to the despair of the challenges that we're in. But then I think what Gregory just named is so incredibly wise. And I just, for me, it really hit home when the amazing Jim Antal wrote his book. And then he and I often create mischief and get into trouble together. And we were at a conference sometime and we're sitting in the back row, and he tells me, he said, if we don't start addressing this, if we don't start acting, then all we're going to talk about is grief. And what I would say, Jim may be more optimistic than I am, but what I would say is that there is at present nothing on the horizon to suggest that we are going to get our act together. There's nothing on the horizon that suggests that the current trajectories that we set probably a generation or two ago, decisions that were made and processes put in place and trajectories that we're set on, that there's anything that can disrupt them at the scale of that would be needed, for the very reasons that we talked about earlier, the absence of courage and the presence of greed and of avarice and these conditions of the current human heart. So that the balancing act then is, how do we not find ourselves wallowing in despair, but how do we also honestly hold the deep grief of the world that we are in, the world over which we now are called to care for, and for me, and for I suspect all of us, the insane heartbreak of the world we will be passing forward. That grief work, I think, is actually probably the most important work for spiritual leaders at this time. The unmetabolized grief that we're carrying right now, particularly in Western culture, is coming out sideways in every imaginable way, in every system that we can see. It's coming out in profoundly destructive, violent, and unhealthy ways. And so our work the most subversive thing maybe we could do right now is to help ourselves and our culture metabolize the deep grief of the harm that we've caused, and the choice of necrophilia over biophilia, the choice of choosing death over life. So you want to invite me to a party, don't you? I tell you. I am
Well,
so
you
much
know,
fun.
I don't want to be simple here. Unfortunately, we have a number of other questions from people. I'm going to turn it over to Martin in just a minute. Jerry, oh my goodness, I want to respond to Cameron so much, but I'm going to be self-controlled and ask Jerry Capel, who had a lot to say in chat, if you want a chance to address these friends, folks, for a minute. If you're still on. If he's not, I'll jump in. But Jerry, are you there somewhere?
Yeah, I was just rolling questions because I thought, okay, we got to get some questions out there. So out of all the things I dumped,
Well, you asked a question or two, and I thought, well, I can't copy that. I'm just going to turn to him. So go for it.
yeah, early on, well, let's see, let me look here. Yeah, I guess so. So from both the film and you guys' conversation, and I think this goes back to one of the first questions you guys asked, which was asked is, and I see this all the time in environmental work, there is no time for all of this nice understanding and this work of love and all this kind of stuff. We just don't have time. So we need to get on with the real thing. And I'm not even sure then it begs the question, what's the real thing? So in both the movie, in the film and your conversation, you guys are all saying, it seems to me, that which I guess St. Francis of Assisi said, speaking only in favor, never against. And that embodies this, the weapons, that's not even a good word, the tools we use to respond to this reality need to be the tools of love, not conflict. But the tools of love are slow working tools. And it seems it just takes time, and it's not aggressive. And so I guess the question kind of is that right? Out of all of your work, is that what you have also concluded? That in the face of all the political drama and the scientific evidence and the necessary deep work that needs to be done, our only real choice are tools of love. Is that right?
I'd like to respond to that. This was asked of, in a different way, of the 15th century mystic Kabir from India. And he said, do what is right. Don't allow yourself to be abused. Take the right action. But as you take the right action, I beg you, I implore you, do not keep this person's essence out of your heart. I'm against this person's behavior. I'm not against this person's essence. So what does that mean? Take the right action. But with what energy are you doing the right action? With hate, with vengeance, with anger, or with a higher awareness that I'm angry at this person's behavior, but this person's being is Christ nature, Buddha nature, Elohim nature. And just this, shall I say, spiritual awareness, Kabir says, has the power to shift heaven and earth. So it becomes a spiritual issue in that sense, from my understanding.
Cameron or Gregory, just a second for either of you to respond, and then Martin's going to jump in and pull it all together.
I will just say amen and amen. Gregory, take it.
Agreed. I do think that in the end it is about love. And sometimes when I think about speed and that love is slow, speed may be what got us into this mess. So I think we have to be very careful when we talk about things being slow as a problem, because things are happening so fast. Things are happening so fast because we did things far, far too fast. and got out ahead of ourselves. So maybe we do need to just all slow down. Probably the most radical thing we could do right now is nothing. Like, let's all just sit down and stop.
That's a tough thing to say to third act.
I was going to say, with that as the message, Martin, tell us what's next.
Well, I
You're
want
talking
to.
about Sabbath, Gregory. I think you're talking about Sabbath. Yeah.
I want to start on behalf of everyone here by thanking Cameron and Gregory and Jamal so much for this presentation. It's just been wonderful having you here. And I also really want to thank Deborah and Ace for pulling this together and for conducting it so well. Thank you so much. And I want to just pick up very briefly on what Cameron said about the importance of facing our grief and learning to not allow it to debilitate us, but in fact to allow it to motivate us in our action, and make a pitch for something that Third Act Faith is sponsoring, which is every second Tuesday of the month, we are having contemplative sessions that are intended to be a space, among other things, for sharing our grief and holding it together and learning to work with it. And so every other month, we do that in the form of a sacred listening circle, where it's an opportunity to share what we're feeling and to listen to one another. And then in the intervening months, we are exploring the work of Joanna Macy, the work that reconnects, which is a really powerful way to transform grief and fear and rage into effective action. And so the next one will be on December 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I also want to say that this wonderful panel was the first in a series of conversations about interfaith relationships and how we as Third Act bring those into our work. And I want to invite everyone here to be thinking about ideas about how Third Act can be increasing interfaith friendship and interfaith work. If you have those thoughts, we're going to close with some music. Put those thoughts in the chat or bring them to the next session. And the next session, the next general meeting, is going to be on the 1st or the 27th of January. And we're going to have a really interesting conversation with Dr. Randy Woodley, who, among many other things, is a Cherokee activist, and he will be talking to us about interfaith relationships through the lens of Indigenous spirituality. So thank you all for being here, and we'll close with a song by the Waylon Jennings.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. Leave the rest behind, it'll turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of one voice. One people, one voice. A song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Blessings.
Blessings to everyone.
Gary, thank you so much.
Shalom, salam, peace, namaste.
Thank you.
Bye, Brother Gregory, Sister Cameron. Bye-bye.